Well, good afternoon, everyone. Go ahead and start our next session here, General Session 3, which is the Kentucky Tornado Outbreak. A lot of great talks we have lined up here. Big event, of course, last December. So we're going to jump right into it here. We're going to start with a virtual talk, and then we'll have all the rest will be in-person talks. Again, if you have some questions, since we have about 6 or 7, best is to put the questions in the app, and then the speakers can answer them a little later on. So keep all that in mind so we can get all these talks in on time. I want to bring in Rick Smith right now with more on the session.
All right, thank you. Thanks for being here, and I'm honored to work with my co-chairs Melissa and Caroline and Tom to chair this session on the Kentucky Tornado Outbreak. I know there's a lot of interest in this, so let's get right into it. Our first speaker is Geoffrey Manikin from the Environmental Prediction Center. He's going to be talking about evaluation of the NCEP model performance for this, not only this outbreak, but another December tornado outbreak. So Geoffrey is our first and only virtual talk of this session. So Geoffrey, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the lead author on this presentation, Logan Dawson, as well as the contributions from other members of EMC's model evaluation group. We are going to talk about both the Kentucky event and the Iowa-Nebraska event, but we'll focus on the Kentucky event due to the theme of the session. Very quick overview. For the Kentucky event, the question was whether there would be open warm sector cells or whether the main event would just consist of less discrete convection on the front. The Iowa-Nebraska event, on the other hand, had a narrow warm sector, and convection was likely just ahead of a very intense front, but the uncertainty was how far north and west instability would develop. So for the Kentucky slides, we're going to look at updraft helicity forecasts from the operational cams, looking for signals for long-lived discrete supercells in the open warm sector. For the UH, we're going to look at it computed between the 2 and 5 kilometer levels above ground. We'll focus on the 24-hour period between 12Z on the 10th and 12Z on the 11th, except for the HER cycles, which only go out to 18 hours. We'll just cover the period of interest on those images. So jumping right in here on the UH plots, we're looking here at the high-res window FV3 and NAM nest at 60 hours. Strong signals in the FV3, not in the NAM nest. Then at 48 hours, the FV3, again, several significant UH tracks that are absent for the most part in the other models. It is worth noting that the FV3 cams are known to have very high climatologies for UH values with much higher values than ARW or NMMB members. Looking at the instability here forecast at 36 hours, the analysis in the lower right, it's pretty clear that the reason we didn't see good signals at longer ranges was that the instability forecasts were way underdone in terms of magnitude and extent to the north of significant instability. You have to note, though, that even though the FV3 member here has the lowest CAPE values, but it had the strongest UH signals, and that's a known feature of that model. It can produce tremendous storms even when it doesn't have very much instability. And if you look at the corresponding reflectivity forecasts, again, most of the cams here have very little signal at 39 hours of strong storms. The HER does have some intense storms, but only up here in Indiana and Illinois. The FV3 has very strong storms, but they're not open warm sector. They're focused more along the prefrontal trough. So let's look at the trends in instability forecasts here. We'll start at 36 and then we'll go to 24 hours out and then 12. And it's pretty clear that there's a notable increase in instability with time. All the different runs here bring higher values and further to the north, except the FV3, which just doesn't ever want to produce very much instability. It's underdone, but again, that's not going to stop it from predicting some very intense storms. So again, the reflectivity now here at 15-hour forecasts, the HER ARW, the high-res window ARW has a notable intense discrete supercell here close to the location here in the Missouri Boot Hill. The high-res window FV3 has a discrete supercell here in western Tennessee. The HER did a good job with a couple of supercells near St. Louis, but it overall had too much warm sector convection. Looking at 36-hour now UH tracks. And again, the FE3 run is a notable outlier with too much coverage of intense UH swaths. The NAM-NEST is the weakest signal of any system. We're starting to see here in these three ARW runs, we're starting to see some potential for longer-lived, weakly rotating cells with isolated periods of higher UH values. 24 hours, same thing. The high-res window FE3 has some very impressive signals of UH, suggesting several long-track supercells. In the ARW runs, we're starting to see now some longer tracks. There's displacement errors and periods of weaker rotating updrafts, but at least some potential shown now for longer track supercells. And if we aggregate all of those CAMs into the HREF, the High Resolution Ensemble Forecast System, we can compute surrogate severe products, which are using the UH tracks to predict a coverage percent or threat of severe weather occurring in a particular area. Again, at 48 hours, we're too far south with the higher probabilities consistent with the earlier FE3 runs. And at 36 hours, we start to move into the right area. And at 24 hours, we are correctly highlighting Western Kentucky with the highest probabilities. The only issue is that if we compare to the practically perfect, which is based on storm reports, you can see that we're notably underdone in terms of the probabilities, but at least the area corridor of interest is highlighted. We should note that surrogate severe forecasts were computed using May climatological values of UH thresholds. Those were probably somewhat high for a cool season event like this. Quick look here at some of the HER cycles hour by hour, and you'll see as we get to the middle of the day, we start to see the idea that from northeast Arkansas into western Kentucky is an area to watch, but not particularly suggestive of a strongly rotating long-lived supercell. The next few cycles, again, there's a signal here that we have to watch this corridor into western Kentucky. Just the UH swaths are still not particularly suggestive of a strongly rotating long-lived supercell. We go to the 0Z cycle. Now the storm is mature in the real world, and we get a longer track here from northeast Arkansas into the Missouri Boot Hill, but it doesn't go farther than that. So even though we're initializing the storm, not able to maintain it into western Kentucky, and even the HER cycles after that, just we're not able to maintain any kind of big signal for western Kentucky, even though the supercell was very long-lived and intense, obviously, at this time. So quick thoughts here. It's unclear whether more forecasts with longer and stronger UH swaths would be even reasonable expectations out of a 3-kilometer convection allowing model. What's the ceiling in NWP on such an extreme event like this? Perhaps like Nestle's worn-on forecast system might shed some light as to whether higher resolution and or more rapidly updating data assimilation might be able to provide better short-term predictions for such an incredible event. Quick look here at the Iowa-Nebraska event, and same issues with instability. Here's 33, 21, 9-hour forecast. You can see instability at longer lead times was underdone and didn't extend far enough back to the west. That was even a problem at very short time ranges, where the SPC outlooks kept having to be adjusted further back to the west and southwest as it became clear that instability was in place over southeast Nebraska and northeast Kansas. And then the surrogate severe for that case, again, with time, the probabilities increased, but this didn't do as good a job of highlighting the corridor of best interest. Again, the practically perfect here shows that the higher observed events were further to the southwest, and we just didn't capture the higher probabilities correctly. And I'll end with a quick plug for our model evaluation group. We have weekly webinars covering reviews of model guidance for high impact cases like these, proposed implementations and model bias investigations. They're open to all. Please send an email to me or to Logan if you'd like to be added to the listserv. And thank you, and I'll be happy to take questions in the chat.
All right. Thank you a lot. Appreciate it. Anybody? One quick question from anybody? Anything? Nothing? Okay. All right, we'll move on. We got 7 fast-moving talks here, so we're going to keep moving. Next up, speaking of fast-moving, is John Gordon. He's the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service Louisville, Kentucky office. I'm going to get out of his way.
Thank you very much. All right, we're putting the band back together. This is an epic event. Why are we in this room? Are we in this room for 7-day dew points? Probably not. We are in here for high-impact weather to save people's lives. We lost so many darn people in Kentucky for an event on the first Friday weekend of December when people are going to holiday parties, and we had to deal with this thing. We had an event 4 days earlier, then January 1st. We were quiet in Kentucky since 2012. Completely quiet. No severe weather for 9 years, and then all hell broke loose. So I love Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's go through this thing. Remember, what's the name of this conference? Convergence. The word of the day is convergence. Anyway, we start off with using the good stuff. The EFI and the shift of tails is a great thing to use. It was pinging Kentucky. In the Showcase Showdown with Drew Carey today, Ryan Sharp, go check out his thing today. He's going to tell you all about the EFI. It's wonderful. What a great, how many of you use the EFI in the Weather Service? Raise your hands, show them. We should be using new tools. The NGM is no longer in existence, gang. All right, on warnings. We have a hybrid cell in the Bowling Green area, multiple areas of convergence, rotation. Dan McKimmey, by the way, on your biggest events in the Super Bowl, do you put Patrick Mahomes in and Terry Bradshaw from Pittsburgh, or you put your 4th-stringer? You put your best people on. Right over here, stand up. That's Dan McKimmey, stand up. He's the radar guy that issued all those warnings and saved people's lives. All right? He's talking about 2 areas of circulation with tornado result in multiple tornadoes. So you put your best people on whether it's aviation or whatever desk it is. Look at these 2. Do you want your 4th-stringer to look at that? Those are 2 different events in the same thing. One is tornadic, one is not. I'm only showing you a little reflectivity, a little SRM. And any guesses? A or B? A, which is tornadic? A or B? Quick. A? B? It's the A's. I'm so sorry. All right. How many of you like the NWS chat? How many are sick and tired of the darn thing breaking? Where's Ken Graham? Where's Ken Graham? Our boss, the big guy, the Twin Towers, is going to get this thing fixed. That's his #1 priority. We're going to get the chat fixed. In the chat, Dan McKimmey says this: if this thing holds together, it's one of the strongest storms ever to impact this area. I cannot understate how serious of a situation it is. Go ahead. We're issuing the tornado well in advance to get people protected. Play offense. All this. If you're a student, raise your hand. Play offense, not defense. In Pittsburgh, Chris Strager's hometown, Chuck Noll played offense. He put 4 things on his finger. Play offense, not defense. The good. Be offensive. I'm tired of this. Get off the damn stage. Here we go. So, we got this big storm coming in. We're putting out constant notes. We're putting things in the chat. How do we receive warnings, whether it's on Android or it's on the Apple? Play offense. Don't play defense. If you want to move ahead in the weather business, play offense. Be proactive. This is not just the QLCS. It's a QLCS Supercell hybrid, getting in the Bowling Green 50 minutes ahead of time, letting know it's coming. It's not a doubt it's coming. It is coming. Rick Smith's a rock star in Norman. Puts out so many good notes ahead of things. Those good video briefings save so many people's lives. Play offense. Survivor stories. There were so many homes that looked like this. Day after day after day looking at this damage. I told my staff, you will not whine. Would you rather be in this house or would you rather be looking at the damage? This lady comes up there, hugs me, grabs me aside and said, I took my 6 little babies, put them in the bathroom because of your warning. And they all lived in this thing. Makes you really realize why we're here. Okay, how many take GIS? Who's taking a GIS class? Take a GIS class. If you want to be better than everyone else, take a GIS class to be able to make these maps. Get that information out. Get to our media partners. There's a bunch of Louisville media out here too. Hello, gang. Those guys help save lives too. We got to play offense and give them the information. Here's where we're going to survey. Here's where we're going to go. Come along and see what we're doing. And we kept putting this information out. We had mutual aid. Weather services into mutual aid. We had help from Paducah and Jackson, Nashville, Indianapolis. A whole bunch of people helped us. Surveying. Where's my WKU people? They surveyed with me for 7 days. 7 days they were out there, helping me figure out what road are we on. There is no internet. There is no cell coverage. There's nothing. We have nothing. Help me. And we took note after note after note. The guy in the red in the back is an engineer from WKU. He went out with me day after day after day. Because my staff kept saying, John, do not go on social media. You're going to have a heart attack. Do not go on social media, John. You're going to have an aneurysm. And I kept wondering, what is it? I eventually did look and had an aneurysm. But anyway, so that was not good. So anyway, we had the Civil Air Patrol helping us, and we were out day after day after day. Would you play Maestro in the back? Would you hit it? This is drones. By the way, there's Dan McKimmey again. He's giving a showcase showdown today on the drones. Check it out. And this is the drone I flew in Bowling Green at the Trans-America Park on the north side of Bowling Green. These are concrete warehouses, metal warehouses. It was a multiple vortex tornado, but there was one tornado inside the center that was probably 36 yards wide. And where it hit was all hell. It was fascinating. Here's the next one gone. And there's scrub trees 70 yards across that had nothing. Nothing. Thank you. Okay, get me back to programming. Thank you. Bless you. You know, in tornadoes, in all the years I surveyed, I've never seen so many cars with 2x4s in them. 2x4s. This one somehow didn't even lose its flat. I don't understand that. That's better called in search of or something. Anyway, there was so many wild things on there across the area. Notice the garages, blow in, blow out, classic sign. Okay, in 2 slides you're gonna see how many miles of tornado have we had in December history in Kentucky. This is our big event, including the Mayfield. Second one came flying out of Tennessee, kept skipping, jumping, skipping. Third one, Nashville surveyed that one in the south. I first showed up in Bowling Green and saw that. You didn't even know what to say. This was Creekside subdivision, Creekwood subdivision, Armageddon. There were 8 homes that were completely wiped out compared to all the rest. So I brought the engineer and we spent 8 hours on 8 homes and we found construction flaws. When you look for surveys, make sure you look at clips. The industry standard is 16 inches. The average on these storms was 48 inches. The mortar, the anchor joist is in the center of the cinder block. They did so many construction flaws I could write a book. But then I went on social media and I saw those nice people saying so much love to me. They gave me some love. You're a bleepity bleep, 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 bleep. 32 miles in the history before this event. In December, we had 182 miles. That's a lot. Here we go as we wrap up. I love this guy, Twister Thomas. I wonder if you're in the audience. Some of these ratings are suspect. It's likely they're too afraid to give out higher ratings. Scale needs to be fixed or a different survey crews. Spending 9-10 hours with flashlights at night when we come home to this love. I now know what the media go through every day. It was total hatred. So many foul words. Damage looks high-end, EF4, EF5, can only be a wedge. These people are idiots, blah, 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 blah. And we wrap up on time. That's a nice old Southern Kentucky home, before and after. And it's just devastating at Christmas. I was at a hotel where little kids, and they put up a Christmas tree in the hotel, running around, their whole house gone. I was just bawling. So, seriously, I'm at my modest minute if you want to follow me, but severe weather, it's nice to see in the middle of Kansas in a field. It's not nice to see in a metro area. Never forget those, especially in Mayfield, never those. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's all take a breath. That was awesome, John. Thank you. Next up, we go to the Paducah office. A couple of talks in the Paducah office who are definitely also at ground zero for this event. Right now we have who was the brand new WCM. I'm going to let her tell you about that. Christine Wielgos from the National Weather Service Paducah office. Christine, go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wielgos. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist of the National Weather Service in Paducah, Kentucky, and I'm going to tell you about my first week as WCM. Start my career in Paducah. So I've been at the Weather Service office in Paducah for 22 years. I started in March of 2000, and for 2 decades, I was under the wing of my predecessor, Mr. Ricky Shanklin. And on December 5th, I took the job officially as warning coordination meteorologist. Well, my first week started out with supposedly being on vacation. I had vacation planned from the 4th through the 12th. Because in the Paducah area, climatology says we don't get much severe weather in December. Well, I'll never make that mistake again. First day, December 5th, we had severe weather in the area. Boss calls and says, get out here, we need to do damage surveys. So I was doing damage surveys on vacation on the 6th and the 7th, and as everybody knows, it was only going to get worse from there. So winter weather preparedness week was actually going on in Kentucky, and Steve, my MIC, and I were slated to go to Henderson, Kentucky to do a Facebook Live. Well, the staff had done such a superior job in messaging the event. We knew a week ahead of time it was going to be bad on December 10th. And you can see some of the hate that we got when we logged on to Facebook Live. And I said, listen, guys, let me get through what we need to get through for winter weather preparedness. I promise you, I will spend as much time as you want going over what's going to happen tomorrow. And we did that. And there were a lot of scared people. You can tell just from the comments how scared people were. So that got me amped up. I was getting stressed out. I knew tomorrow was going to be a big day. And I just didn't know how big it was going to be. So December 10th, again, I'm still on vacation. But as any WCM in the room knows, you're never really truly off, are you? Right? Phone calls, texts, emails. How bad's it going to get? When's it going to get here? All that. Well, then later on in the evening, well, before that, I felt very odd. I spent 20-some years in operations. As a lead forecaster, my priorities are different, right? I want to be there for the staff. So I called them up a couple of times during the day. I said, hey, you guys need me? Do you need anything? And they're like, rest up, Christine. We're going to need you later. So that's what I did. But later on in the evening, that monster Supercell, as probably all of you in the room noticed, coming up from Arkansas and into the Boot Hill of Missouri. And we just knew that was going to be it. That was the storm. So now in the mindset of a WCM, your mind is racing. Okay, how bad is this going to get? How many people are going to be impacted? Okay? Blood pressure was going up pretty rapidly at that point. It's getting really nervous. So storm comes into Kentucky, hits Mayfield. At that moment, I can't tell you, looking at that radar image, and I'm sure there's nobody in the room that didn't realize how bad that was as soon as it went through Mayfield. Your heart just kind of sinks. And I felt very compelled to do something at that point. I didn't know what it was, but I felt very compelled to do something. So I started calling emergency managers. I called Marshall, Lyon, Caldwell to the east of Mayfield and said, guys, this is it. It's coming. Be ready. And it wasn't a few minutes after I made all those phone calls that I'm getting bombarded with texts, phone calls from my boss, from the office, from other emergency managers, and then the one that really hit me. The Region 1 Kentucky Emergency Manager calls, who takes care of all of Western Kentucky, and he says, Christine, we have extensive damage, numerous injuries, and numerous fatalities. And I'm trying to write this all down on a pad of paper, and I stopped writing because I couldn't even write anymore. That was like a dagger to my heart. Those are my people out there we serve. When I heard numerous deaths, it was very overwhelming. I was in shock. I didn't know what to think at this point. I couldn't really even process what had happened. It's like, who can I call? Who can help me through this right now? So I thought of Ricky Shanklin. And one of the last calls of the night was to Rick, and the first 3 words out of my mouth were, Rick, I'm scared. And I didn't sleep much that night. I don't think many of us did. So the next day, we all gathered up, and the biggest question is, where do we start? We had no idea it was a long-track tornado. We had no idea where the heaviest damage was. We knew Mayfield was hit bad. We knew Dawson Springs was hit bad. So we gathered up 3 teams. Steve, my MIC, and I go to Mayfield. And that first glimpse of Mayfield, kind of like what John talked about, is beyond shocking. And every part of your being feels numb. You come across a bridge to go over to Mayfield, and it looks like a nuclear bomb had gone off. Nothing prepares you for that. I've been in the Weather Service 22 years. I haven't seen damage like that. So it's crazy. I'm not going to read that all that to you, but that's just a very small subset of the issues that were going on that day alone. Where do you start? There's so much damage to look through. We have rescue teams still trying to rescue people. There's damage in the streets, power lines down, excessive traffic. It's December, you don't have a whole lot of long days to work with, and so on and so forth. So later on that morning, our Pat Spoden, our Science and Operations Officer, who is now retired, who actually worked the event and put the warnings out, we rode in a helicopter, a Black Hawk helicopter, and it was very apparent after that ride that we need help. This is not something that one office is going to be able to do by themselves. It was apparent at that point. It was continuous. It was a mile wide, and there was no way we're doing this ourselves. We need help. We need it now. So the next day, it was Sunday, and we had more survey teams going back out to do more surveys. But we had rock stars coming in from the offices in Lincoln, Springfield. We had people from the quick response team coming out. Chrissy Hurley in Nashville took over surveying to the south of us. Steve and I went back to southwest of Mayfield to try to find more damage, and you get called back to the EOC for briefings. I briefed the Kentucky governor, briefing Jim Cantori, and then came a national press conference. Christine's never done a national press conference before, okay? So Steve says, well, I can do it. He's like, you can do it. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. You stand right there. Don't move. So you see all these pictures? That guy in the blue there is my boss. Where was he? Right there. And the whole time doing that press conference, I see him out of the corner of my eye shaking his head and nodding. So I knew that if I fell, if I faltered, if I screwed up, he was only a second away to come and fix things and make things all better, right? So the week ahead, again, there's a lot going on. I can't begin to tell you all the stuff that went on, but just a couple of highlights. You're working 15, 16-hour days. I probably put 60 hours overtime in a week and a half. Continued damage surveys. 60 Minutes was here for 2.5 days. You had questions and pressure. Why are you not done with the rating? Because I had 128 square miles of damage to look at. That's a lot of damage, even with help. Questions of why it's an EF4, not an EF5, and so on and so forth. So if you were to ask me, what is the number one reason of how you made it through this event, with it being 5 days after you took the job as a WCM? And I can say there's two reasons. One is our Science and Operations Officer, our Sue, who's now retired, and my boss, my meteorologist in charge, Mr. Steve Eddy. These guys were my rocks. Steve was with me every single day for a solid week. Never left my side. You don't think that an MIC has other things that he has to do, like maybe run an office, right? But these guys were absolutely instrumental in making sure that I was sane, that I was calm, and that we were able to be positive about this event. And we woke up each day having some courage to tackle every day that we had to go forward. So every single day was a new adventure, new challenges, new things we had to deal with. But we talked, we brainstormed, we solved problems together, we discussed, we laughed, we cried, we did everything together as a team, okay? They led me through every step and weren't gonna let me fail. And I knew that and I felt that. And so their immeasurable and unwavering support is the only reason I didn't have a nervous breakdown, and I made it through, and I continue to make it through. So I'll never forget how supported I feel, and I hope each and every one of you have that support team, have your rocks, okay? And as I end with my last slide here, which is a social media post I created and put up on Facebook and Twitter about a week after the event. It was a way for us to give back, to let the community know we were with them. So as you guys read that, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge one of those rocks in my life, and that is my boss, Mr. Steve Eddy. Steve, where are you? There you are. Stand up, please. With that, that's all I have. Thank you all so much.
Wow, thank you, Christine. Appreciate it. Well, now that Steve's standing up, he can come on up and, oh, you're gonna sit? Okay, you can still sit. Steve Eddy is the meteorologist in charge at the Paducah office, and he's gonna continue the story of what went on before, during, and after the event in their office. So Steve, take it away.
All right, thank you. I don't know how to follow that. But I kind of knew that was coming. We spend a lot of time talking. Forgive me, I've got a bad back going on today, so I'm going to kind of sit, and that's unlike me, but I'm more like John Gordon. I'd love to be running back and forth, jumping off the stage. I'm going to tell my story from an MIC point of view, at least this MIC's point of view. Christine covered a lot of the stuff, and that's good, because when I did this talk a while back for our partners, I want to recognize our partners, some of our partners sitting over here. We have Trent and Noah, and I believe somewhere, where are you, Bo? Anyway, Bo's there too. So they're part of our media, and without them, as I'll reference here, we couldn't have done all this. So, but I just wanted to start with, what's my view? Is that you're sitting there as an MIC and all this crud's going on, and so how are you gonna deal with all this? So first thing I wanted to do was, not all of you are forecasters or weather service people, so you may not even know what an MIC does. I'm not sure I do either, but I've been doing it for about 15 years. You kind of just wing it a lot, but my job is more, we forecast, some forecast a little more, like my good buddy John. I'm not forecasting that often, but I can do it. Others do, but my job, the way I look at it, is to provide direction and resources, and most importantly, to set a culture in the office so that we are prepared to handle things like Mayfield tornado or the West Kentucky tornado. So, you've heard all this great stuff from John and from Christine, that it all went great. Uh-oh, no it didn't. There was all kinds of issues that were going on in the background, and as an MIC, you're concerned about that. We lost power. We've had consistent issues at Paducah with various things, but usually comms. But in this case, we had a piece of equipment fail on us, a transfer switch. So we lost power, and then it tried to change over to generator, and it wouldn't do it. And that was the next county over from Mayfield. So we're in the middle of issuing tornado emergencies, and our power goes completely out. I wasn't in the office. I tell my staff, if you want me, call me. I'm a phone call away, you just call. And they all handled it, did great job, but it's one of those things. They just, I think my next slide covers it well, but I do want to cover the last bullet before I go on and talk a little more about the outage and how we handled it. But the thing is, when you lose your power in the weather service, if you lose all of it, if you go down completely, AWIPS goes down, which is our computer system, that sends the programming to the weather radios. So when we lose that, those weather radios are no longer working. That's not very important in a big tornado event, right? So that's one thing that I had to answer to, right? And I'll talk a little about that. So a little more about what's an MIC do. Let me see if I went too far here. I think that works. Okay. But I don't know if I can get that to go back. Can you guys do that? There it is. Whoops. Now it's working. So talked about things that didn't do, and there was a lot more that we were dealing with, but I don't have a lot of time to do all this, so I shortened it up to just those two major things. But what did go well is we lost power, but we practice service backup regularly, and our good friends, well, Louisville is pretty busy. They're our primary backup. And then our secondary backup is Springfield, Missouri, and they were on top of it. We called them, and they picked it up. And our EMs, our media, no one even noticed. Just took over, and thank you very much for that work. So that's awesome, and that's a good testament to that we do this, and it's just take right over. But the techs come rolling in. It's middle of the night on a Friday night. They come rolling in, and they're working their butts off trying to fix this. So great people, committed. Just we got wonderful people all the way through the agency. But one of my main points is Christine and I think it was on maybe Sunday, we were driving down to go do some more damage surveying or talk to the governor or whomever, and I said, doesn't it strike you that this is what the positive that came out of this? I mean, it stinks. 57 people lost lives. A lot of people's lives are gone. But yet there was 30,000 people in the path of this thing. And, you know, and it's amazing how many stories John heard, I heard, Christine heard, as we were out doing damage surveys of people doing what they were supposed to do. Well, who told them that? I think it was a three-legged stool. I think the emergency management community, the media, and the National Weather Service have been working together for 30 some odd years, telling the same story consistently over and over and over again. And then as the danger is approaching, you've got Noah and Trent over there on the TV telling people, reminding them, if you're in the path of this, get in your tub, you know, cover yourself up, whatever. That saved a lot of lives. Get out of it if you're in a mobile home. So again, I just can't thank them enough for helping us to save lives. It's not just us, it's the whole thing. So I think I'm gonna zip through this one because Christine did a lot better job than I can with this. You know, I empower people. Yeah, the MIC, I had my toughest choice was, do I stay back at the office and deal with all the other stuff that I should be dealing with, or do I deal with a brand new employee who I can set up to fail by just letting her go out on her own? You know, when I had been through my, back in 2002, I had the Veterans Day tornado, Van Wert, that I dealt with. So I'd been there, and I didn't want her to fail. The last thing I wanted. So I made the choice to empower Pat. You take care of everything else, and the Sioux, and he took care of everything. He did a great job. He'd just call and tell me I'm doing this. I'm like, perfect, get it done. Mental health of the staff, I'll say a couple times in slides. That's something more and more. Back in the day when I started, you know, we're tough. We don't, blah, blah, blah. You know, and we weren't, you know, but nowadays it's really cool because now it's okay. You can come in, you can talk to somebody. That we dealt with, and I know they did at Louisville too. Just can't highly recommend that more. It really helped people. But my job is to keep John from having an aneurysm, right? I mean, the way we look at this, they got these people screaming at us, and staff, don't worry about it. Do your job. Let me deal with that. If an EM's upset, let me deal with it. That's my job. And, you know, I had John Murphy going through my rock asking me to rate a tornado where we only had done a half, and it wasn't his fault. I know he was trying to protect us too, but the President of the United States is asking, give him a rating, you know, and I'm trying to protect my staff from that. So those are just a few of the things that are going on. I think Christine talked about this stuff pretty well. She did not mention we did place an on-site decision support services person over in Marshall County for a few days because weather popped up. So that emergency manager wanted a forecaster there to help them. There's a lot of people out there exposed, right? There's people without homes. There's people up on, trying to put power wires back up and everything. So it's a great time to have decision support things. Again, if I wasn't doing my job, people weren't prepared, and you can't provide that service. So my job is done well ahead, usually, I argue. So, and then of course we get to do this kind of stuff, right? And we're up here doing our thing, talking to people. I don't know how many talks I've given in Mayfield, how many talks, you know, along the path after. And I always walk away. They're very pleased with what we did. So I want to wrap up with I call it one National Weather Service. Without the Weather Service, all the help from my neighbors, coming and helping us. Christine talked about a few things. We had people come from Central Illinois. We had people coming from over in, I'm getting my cane, so I'll wrap up here. But we had people come over, help us, damage surveys and stuff. We couldn't have done how many was it? 162 miles in RCWA, a mile wide. Yeah, you can't do that with what, 8-hour days of light. Just was crazy. Emergency management, media, thank you. Without you, we couldn't have done it. And headquarters, thank you for all your support. They always were there saying, what do you need, what do you need, what do you need, and they meant it. And so I'm very thankful I work for this agency. They are all there. I'm very thankful for all of the people I work with that are not in the agency too. I really enjoy my mission, and they do too. And thank you. I'm going to get off here before they yank me off. So.
Up next in our session, we have Kyle Perez from WFO Springfield.
All right, this is going to be a tough one to follow up after all those great presentations. Can everybody hear me good? Okay. All right, so as Steve and Christy mentioned both times throughout their presentation, NWS Springfield, we provided service backup that night. So I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a different twist, though, different look at that, and talk about how we leveraged the Central Region Remote Mesoanalysis Program on the night of December 10th into December 11th. I'd like to also thank my co-authors on this presentation, Jason Shulman, who is a Science and Operation Officer at NWS Springfield, Keith Sherburne, who is a meteorologist at Rapid City, South Dakota, and Christopher Knowles, who is a lead meteorologist at NWS Paducah. So just to kind of give you a brief overview of what the Central Region Remote Mesoanalysis Program is, tomorrow Randy Graham will actually have a presentation taking a closer look at what exactly the RMA program is and what it entails. So I'm just going to briefly go over the concept. And it's a big keyword that, we've heard John and Steve talk about it already in their presentations, and that's a mutual aid concept. So providing mesoanalysis ahead of and during the severe weather event. And we're focusing on everything from the key decision points, areas of concern or uncertainty, how the storm evolution may be downstream, where's the convective initiation going to take place, and we're leveraging the expertise. So when we're talking about expertise in this scenario, the Central Region has put together over 20 RMA facilitators now for this particular program, and we also leverage the expertise of the Storm Prediction Center, folks from the WAS group. So it's a great Google Space environment to share all that knowledge, and the end goal there is then to enhance the situational awareness and decision support for the supported offices in Central Region, and that is building that one NWS and working towards the same end goal. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We all know what the day was and how the environment was set up with the big enhanced outlook and moderate across portions of the middle Mississippi Valley. So what does RMA initiation look like? So we are, the Central Region has a facilitator that gets in there, sets up a new chat thread for any kind of given day. So for this particular event, we had participation from the Springfield, Missouri office, St. Louis, Paducah, and Louisville all participated in that particular chat room that day. And that is open to anybody in the Weather Service to follow along as well as a learning experience. The RMA facilitators for this particular evening were Keith Sherburne, with Alice Kroll and Brian providing in some knowledge in the latter part of the support. So I'm just going to provide a quick glimpse of what the RMA support looks like through an event and for this particular event. So, there's everything from sharing satellite imagery, soundings, doing hand surfaces analysis, sharing some SBC meso graphics. But we're not just sharing the graphics. There's also context to those graphics. Like they say a picture can be worth 1,000 words, but if you just share an SBC meso-analysis graphic, we could all do that on our own, so to say. So adding that extra context from and leveraging the expertise of these RMA facilitators is where we really get our bang for our buck with this program, and kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like going through in a particular event. So as Steve and everybody has mentioned in their previous presentations, we went into service backup for this particular event. This is what the radar imagery looked like. Our Springfield CWA is outlined in yellow there, and this is what our radar looked like at 9:52. This is about 15 minutes actually before we took over. So as you can see, our event's starting to wind down to the east. At this point, we're starting to consider how can we reduce staffing at this point for any extra call-ins, and we only have one severe thunderstorm in our eastern counties. And then things changed. As you know, we went into service backup. This is a tweet from NWS Paducah saying that they have taken a power hit and NWS Springfield will be taking over operations until further notice. And this will not impact any of the tornado warnings that are currently in effect. So thanks for them putting that out, because that puts a lot of pressure on me now as the warning operator. So this is the exact radar imagery that I think one of you guys had shared, and it shows you what we took over as. When we took over, there was an ongoing tornado emergency in Benton, Kentucky, with that considerable further downstream to get ahead of the storm. And then just looking quickly at the velocities there. Over the next hour, during service backup, we would go on to issue another 4 tornado emergencies at our office, or in service backup at our office. And how did we leverage the RMA support during this event? Well, it allowed us to quickly come up to speed on the environment. We had our own event going on that evening, so we knew our environment pretty well. We knew the environment was primed for tornadoes out east. You know, it's hard not to, especially as meteorologists, to be interested in what's going on, but you really don't know the details. So this really was a great opportunity for us to, quickly come up to speed. Some of the things I'm looking to know at this particular time, what is the downstream environment like? Is there any signs of weakening or strengthening ahead of this? What kind of tornado damage threat tags may I be using downstream? And then also the warning duration. This is a long track tornado, so we want to get out ahead of this as much as possible. And this just shows you one of the examples there on the right-hand side of the RMA facilitator posted in there just 2 minutes after we took over, kind of giving us a brief idea of what the environment was like, and that then the environment would sustain this supercell for at least the next hour or two before there was any kind of upscale growth. So I'm just going to go over a couple of quick examples here. Just grabbing a few of them throughout the night, but just great information coming over, able to facilitate this information. I'm on the warning desk at this particular moment, but I have a warning assistant next to me using a team concept of warning operations, and they're able to quickly relay this information to me. What are they seeing as far as the mesoscale environment? And what kind of things may influence my downstream warnings. And here's another great one that shows the high STP values, and Keith Sherburne added some context there to it. Ahead of the line, the STP value is still very much favorable for a violent tornado. So kind of wrap things up here, the service backup warning summary. We went on for a total of 5 hours of full service backup. During that time frame, we issued 13 tornado warnings, 3 base, 6 considerable, and 4 emergency. We issued 6 severe thunderstorm warnings, 1 flash flood warning. But the goal here was really to, hit home that mutual aid was so big and played such a big factor in this. These aren't things that, we could have got done just by ourselves. It's all about mutual aid to the rescue, and being able to quickly come up to speed on the environment that you're working in, and increasing your confidence on downstream warnings and potential damage threat tags. And then just left it there with a couple of pictures there of some damage, I believe in Dawson Springs, and a graphic there that I pulled from the Paducah page. So really want to hit home, this RMA program, we're going to continue to build that across Central Region, and it's a concept I think that we'll continue to see grow, towards building that one NWS goal, and, being there for each other in the end. So, we're all one team at the NWS.
If anybody has any questions, you can make sure you can ask those on the HOOVA app. Great presentation on mutual aid. Up next, we have Jake Dissinger from Western Kentucky University. He's an undergraduate student, and he's going to be presenting on the tornado in Bowling Green.
All right. Wait for this to get loaded here. All right, like she said, my name is Jake Dissinger. I am a current student at WKU, and just like many of us that night, we were, watching storms as they unfold, and unfortunately we had one strike very, very close to the university and of course, right directly downtown. And so today I'm talking about the tools that we got to use with the National Weather Service to determine the strength of that actual tornado. And like John Gordon said, I was with all the students. We were out there for 7 days. I think I was with them for 6 out of the 7 days, just doing nonstop sunrise to sundown surveying, which really isn't a whole lot because sunrise to sundown in December is really only about 8 to 9 hours. But anyway, going into this, of course, we've all seen the radar screenshots. There were actually 2 tornadoes that impacted the city of Bowling Green independent from each other. Tornado 1 was the main one that bisected the city and caused major EF3 damage. And Tornado 2 was the lower end EF2 that was also much shorter and impacted the area near the airport and southern edge of town. And of course, just the quick facts, like I said, it was an upper end EF3 of 165 miles an hour. It was on the ground for about 30 minutes and hit about 30 miles. So it was moving at about 60 miles an hour the entire time, which is very significant, but not uncommon for wintertime storms. It was about a quarter mile wide at its largest point and unfortunately took the lives of 17 people. And of course, there you can see the main track, like I said, it just bisected the city, and that secondary track just took down near the airport and areas south of town. And the area I highlighted right there, that is WKU's campus, and as you can see, that is about as close as a call as you can get without a direct hit. And all of those stars are dormitories that still had students in them, even though the semester technically ended that previous night. There were still hundreds of people on campus. So that is about as close as a call as you can get. It was about 250 yards from the nearest dorm. And alluding again to what John Gordon mentioned, probably the hardest hit residential area was Creekwood, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And the tools we really got to use here, of course, was engineering and obviously meteorological forensics. That's just more so the whole scope of things is forensics, but the biggest part, of course, was engineering, because as you can see, there are about 8 houses that were just completely slabbed. There's nothing left. And to those who don't know much about surveying, you would think that that means EF4, EF5 damage because there's just nothing left. But going into deeper things, you'll see that these houses just were unfortunately just put together terribly and really set these people up for failure for tornadoes. Going into it again, there's one of our university professors that goes over engineering. He was there telling us, showing us the anchor bolts and how they're supposed to be put in the ground and in the mortar and everything, and then showing us how they actually are. The shortcuts taken, how there's, like John Gordon said, they're supposed to be 16 inches apart, but they are way, way further apart than they should be, and which is alluding us to, again, that this tornado, even though it was still very strong, it's nowhere near the EF4 or EF5 power that is needed to demolish well-built homes. And this is the picture on the left. This was measured, we decided 155 miles an hour. If you notice in the background, there are trees still standing, and you're basically looking down the barrel of the gun. This is exactly where the tornado came from. And the house is nothing but a foundation, but those trees are still standing. If this was an EF5 tornado, those trees would be in the next county. And again, it just alluded to the point that unfortunately these houses were just mistakenly built, cut corners, because this was lower income housing. And so people probably thought that they could cut corners, get cheaper housing, and get people in houses. But unfortunately, it resulted in the lives of 11 people lost in this neighborhood alone. Out of the 17, 11 lives were lost in this neighborhood. And of course, this is at another house at 125 miles an hour. We got to see more 2x4s being impacted into cars and everything like that. It was amazing. We've always seen pictures of 2x4s being implanted in objects from tornadoes, but seeing it in person is entirely different. And going to this is one house that I got a before picture and an after picture, and I wanted to allude, I tried finding before pictures for the Creekwood houses. I couldn't find any. And the radar, or the Google Street View images was from 2013, so those houses were less than 10 years old. They were not older houses, and in fact, this tornado went through part of the historic district in Bowling Green, and those houses fended off way better than these, and those have been there for over 100 years. But anyway, moving back to this is a house that was built originally a long time ago, and then later on, decades later, it had a rebuilt, or just an add-on, and of course it was built differently. much better, most likely up to code. And the newer section is still on its foundation, while the older one, the original, was just completely moved off its foundation. It's still not entirely destroyed, but nevertheless, it has moved entirely off its foundation, whereas the newer add-on is still standing very firmly to its foundation. And this was, again, at near max intensity of 165 miles an hour. Again, this is at Trans Am Industrial Park that we saw some pretty significant damage to the warehouses. Again, this is a before picture, and that's what's left of it. 165 miles an hour, it was pretty bad. Thankfully, it's easier to look at stuff like this knowing that there's nobody in this, and this was a more industrial area compared to residential people, where you get to see people still picking up the rubble from what used to be their lives. And again, before I move on to the next big part of the tools that we got to use, the engineering was so important to this. And I always understood that building construction and engineering went into surveys, but I never understood how much until I actually got to sit down and watch our engineering professor tell us about this and work with John Gordon and, figure out exactly what happened, and figuring out that these houses just weren't built very well, and figuring out how to rate these things. But the next biggest thing, and the thing that I found most interesting, was the use of UASs in the survey. And for those of you who don't understand, the UAS stands for Unmanned Aerial System, or drones, basically. And so what I got to take my drone with and use it in a couple different areas just in case, and I did get to use it. First part that was really cool is I got to take it up in the air, and you can see ground scarring. And that could help allow us to see more of the direct path. And in the left picture, that is Creekwood, so that is a ground mark as it moved into Creekwood. And of course, it also gave us more evidence to what John said about how this was multi-vortex tornado with one small vortex doing a lot of the damage, because, that ground scar is not a mile wide. That is very thin. And that, again, just gave us more evidence for John to conclude that this was multi-vortex with just one or two really, really powerful subvortices. The other thing was Bowling Green in Kentucky, it's rural. And of course, we use the Survey 123 app, I think, hopefully I'm right on that, to put in the damage points and everything to make it better for the office, and they can just make the process go smoother. Out in the middle of nowhere, there's no service to upload it. And instead of waiting around burning precious daylight, I can take up the drone, we can look over what we believe is the path, take a few pictures, bring it down, and then when I'm at home at night, I can go through some GIS software that actually is made for drones, and I can go through the code and find the XY coordinates where the drone was, the heading, and the altitude. So in other words, I can find out exactly where that picture was taken, put it all in a nice email with the picture, send it off to John or whoever's at the Weather Service, and he can decide if he wants to include that in the survey. Instead of having to wait for the survey app to load, he has that as his disposal. And that's pretty much it.
If there's any questions, go ahead and put them in the Hoover app, and Jake can take care of those. Up next is John Bowen. He's also a Western Kentucky student at the graduate school in Western Kentucky, and he's also going to present something a little bit different about what the DSOC did in the Bowling Green tornado.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. As Melissa said, my name is John Bowen. I'm a graduate student at Western Kentucky University, and I am the head of our new Disaster Science Operations Center. I manage the student operations and logistics for that. And today's conversation is going to be about a student perspective of the December 11th tornado and how our Disaster Science Operations Center was this was our first major activation. So the first picture there you'll see is the last images that I saw from our White School weather cam of the tornado, very close to campus. You can see in the background the tallest storm on campus, PFT, is just about to disappear into the darkness before I lost power and had no communication and nothing to go on after this point. This was probably the scariest event that I've ever had to sit through. So there's a couple important questions that I want this presentation to answer. what is our Disaster Science Operations Center, and how is it different from White Squirrel Weather? If you don't know what White Squirrel Weather is, it's our on-campus weather service that we use to provide weather to our university. There's a showcase for it after this session. I highly encourage you to visit us and be happy to tell you more. But what role do we play in campus and community safety? What were the results of the impacted on the city of Bowling Green? And what was kind of the response from the community? And then finally, what was our response as the new Disaster Science Operations Center working with White Squirrel Weather and university leadership? What were the challenges we faced and some of the lessons that we were able to learn from this incident? So first, DSOC is our brand new Disaster Science Operations Center that we have just recently completed the construction of on campus at Western Kentucky University. Now, we had started this initiative prior to the December 11th event, and the December 11th event was the first activation of all of our resources for disaster response and mitigation. So DSOC is focused on student-centered initiatives, and it focuses on all hazards. Where White Squirrel Weather is mostly weather-based impact support for the university, we are under that umbrella but focus more on all hazards. We want to be able to do weather, train derailment, on-campus active shooters, anything that would encompass a natural or man-made hazard. And the goal is to use an applied research to operations method. This method we have found to be the most successful, and it's how we've implemented DSOC over the course of the last year. So we have two sides to DSOC. The first is our Operations and Situational Awareness Support Center. We had the opportunity to tour Amazon's Global Operations Center, and that's kind of what we based it on here was GSOC. So that's why we have DSOC, our Disaster Science Operations Center. And then the second side is more of our communications and community partners side. So this is where we'll collaborate with PBS and other partners to help with communications. We're going to have a radio booth here, and eventually there'll be a full-size TV setup that will allow us to go on the air and assist with weather information and get that kind of out to the community for that. So let's go over quickly what happened here. So we identified the weather threat days before on campus, and we provided that forecast to the university and their decision makers. Our job is to provide forecasts to our university meteorologists, and then he disseminates that information to the leadership of the university and helps guide them in making appropriate decisions. And overall, there was 3 tornadoes that impacted Warren County, 2 in Bowling Green specifically. So I just want to go over very quickly some of the timeline of events as that tornado came and impacted campus. So at 1:08 a.m., we saw the circulations enter Warren County. You see the one to the north, one to the south. These were both rated as EF3 tornadoes. The northern one was decaying as the southern one was strengthening. At 1:10, we see that main circulation intensify. And then at 1:14, we see that debris ball. And in our group chat, we're continually providing additional information to each other, trying to push that information to the university officials and our partners. And this was kind of the moment where we knew campus was most likely going to take a direct impact. Nobody said it in the chat, but afterwards we all discussed it, and we all had that sinking feeling that this was going to be a historic event, and this is going to be something that impacted the rest of us throughout the rest of our lives and careers. This very clear and dangerous debris ball, it looked like it had made a direct impact on campus. And this was about the time that a lot of us lost communications with each other. Cell towers went down, the entire city lost power, and we didn't know what was going on. At 1:20, it passes, as Jake mentioned in the previous talk, just less than 100 yards from campus. There was significant damage on campus, but none of it was a direct result of that main circulation. A lot of it was debris impacting and causing damage in a secondary capacity. And then at 1:31 a.m., the tornadic circulation debris ball signature leaves Warren County area. And it's at this time that we are already in operations mode. We're working to get our university EOC up and running and get basically people in place so that we can begin responding to this event. So like I said, there was 3 total tornadoes that impacted Warren County. 2 of those tornadoes were EF3s with Winds exceeding 136 miles an hour. You saw the maximum was 165 miles an hour. And then that smaller tornado near the airport that had winds in excess of 110 miles an hour. Now, DSOC, our Disaster Science Operations Center, we participated in damage surveys, as Jake mentioned, and we want to thank a big thank you to John Gordon for allowing us to come out and do those surveys with them, because it gives us necessary experience as students. We were able to do those surveys for a number of days, and there were unfortunately 17 fatalities within the city. So what was our response specifically? Well, those tornadoes hit between 1:10 and 1:30 in the morning on December 11th, and within the hour, our command post was up and running in our environmental health and safety room. And our emergency management team, which consists of university decision support, their leadership, White Squirrel Weather, and DSOC, we were all in the same room trying to communicate and coordinate and just try to figure out what had happened. Obviously, there were many, many challenges to this event. Communication failure was a big one. We lost cell service across most of the city, and WKU lost radio service. We have a repeater on top of Cherry Hall on our campus for our emergency management use, and power to that repeater and backup power to that repeater had both failed. So we didn't have radio service, we didn't have cell service. I was in the dark for several hours because I couldn't leave to go to campus because I was trapped by debris. It was probably the scariest event that I've ever had to participate in, forecast for, and then respond to after. And then it was a nighttime event, so it was impossible to determine total extent of damages across the university. You know, we thought the university had taken a direct hit, and it wasn't until daylight that we realized we got lucky at the university, and then we could shift our focus more from what can we do for our university to how can we help our community and respond to that. So the team successfully tracked storms leading and throughout the event, and we had some very quick response times. And we even were able to provide additional support for the city EOC. We had students go out and participate and be in the city EOC, work with city police department, taking phone calls, providing additional decision support service, because even after this initial tornado hit, there was still ongoing weather that we had to respond to and observe to make sure that no other fatalities that were going to happen that night. So the big question is, why involve students at all? Well, you know, it might surprise you, but a lot of students, we study our butts off in order to obtain our degrees, but oftentimes we lack experience by the time we have that degree. And as, you know, tragic and disastrous as these events are, it does provide us with necessary experience if the agencies overseeing these operations allow us. One of the most heartbreaking things that I've ever had to do is, you know, have an event happen and then go out and ask to be able to provide assistance and support, and then being told no. Because you know you have the knowledge and you know you need the experience and you want to be involved and help in some way, and being told no is just heartbreaking, because you understand that you want to go and help. So it's a little difficult. But there was a lot of lessons learned, and the number one lesson that our city learned was that we have students with the experience and knowledge to be able to help. Let's let them do that. One of the big things that the fire chief mentioned was being able to allow us to come in and help, and that, you know, we've been assisting with their decision support services ever since. So thank you very much. This has been a wonderful experience, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them in the OVAP.